All right, joining us now to give us his take is the analyst rated Bloomberg best on Apple stock. That's Brian Marshall of Gleacher Co. Brian, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. You just heard Scott Galloway saying effectively it doesn't matter what the succession plan is or whether they disclose it or not. It's just important to disclose what they're going to do. So what's your take on this?
Sure. I think Apple's been pretty clear. They prefer to give less information than not. And so, I think they do not want to talk about the succession plan publicly. Clearly, they have one in place, and hopefully it's not needed to be implemented anytime soon. But at the end of the day, I think what's going to happen today is the request to make that public will probably be voted down.
Interestingly, the stock is up today. Brian, what's your take on this? Is this related directly to that shareholder meeting?
I don't think so, actually. If you look at the last week, it's been kind of choppy waters in technology. Clearly Apple has come down by about $30, which is a pretty big move for the name. I think this is trading at basically a market multiple, so a very attractive valuation. And I think that this is a little bit of flight to quality. Obviously, we had HP report some earnings last night that disappointed some. Stocks down about 10% today, so could be a little bit of asset allocation, if you will, amongst technology names.
Yeah, just a rotation within the tech sector, generally speaking. But let's get back to Steve Jobs for just a moment. I guess you can argue which company is most closely tied to sort of the CEO, but Apple has to be up in the top 5 as the company that really was created through his vision. And whenever we hear any news, and certainly in the past when we've heard news of his medical problems, you have seen sort of at least an intraday trade-off in the stock. I mean, looking just earlier this year, we had that announcement came over a long weekend here in the U.S. So there wasn't trading on Monday. But if you look at what happened at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, you can actually see the stock traded off about 7%. But, within a week's time or just a few days, look, it's almost a perfect V, came back quite quickly. And then the other medical leave, when Steve Jobs took off, this was back in 2009, he took off 6 months. The stock was actually up pretty considerably, 67% during that 6-month period. So, in the end, how much does Steve Jobs, I don't want to say really matter to this stock, but it seems like investors are willing to move on.
I think that's a good point. Obviously, we wish Steve well. Hopefully, he has a good recovery and a good birthday tomorrow. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, this is a recurring pattern, and investors are familiar with the pattern. And I think they're very comfortable with having the company's current COO, Tim Cook, at the helm of the company. He's done it twice in the past, acted as acting CEO. I think he'd be a permanent, I think he'd do a great job as a permanent CEO, and I think the investment community is fairly comfortable with that. Clearly, again, Steve is irreplaceable, but at the end of the day, he's not going to be at the company forever. And I think, should he not be with the company in the future, I think the impact will be felt longer term down the road, 3 to 5 years, how he helps, sort of track the course for the company. But at the end of the day, I think investors are very comfortable with the current management team in place.
Do you think they'd be looking for a replacement for Tim Cook in the long run?
Well, I think the COO position is an important position at Apple. So clearly, if Tim were to be elevated to CEO on a full-time basis, that would open up the CEO slot at Apple, and clearly that would be something that would probably be filled as well. If you look at it, Apple's probably going to be about a $120 billion revenue company today. So there's a lot of infrastructure associated with that. And while the CEO sets strategic direction, it's the COO responsibility to make sure that operations are intact. So I do think that would be something that they'd have to fill going forward.
Brian, quickly, we've heard various rumors, nothing confirmed, I think, by Apple at this point. Let's talk quickly about the launch of iPhone 5 or the release of iPhone 5, as well as iPad 2, and what your expectation is.
Sure. A lot of chatter out of the Asian supply chain that there's delays on both products. I actually think there's no delays. I continue to expect that the iPad 2 ships in April. And we're going to potentially hear about that on March 2nd at Apple's next event that they're hosting here in San Francisco. And then finally on iPhone 5, I don't expect any delays as well. A normal shipment on an annual basis, which will be late June, early July.
Are we going to see a cheaper iPad?
I think there'll probably be some price cuts as well and some better functionality. So I do think that'll be coming. I think they won't advertise much the price, but more push the increased functionality like dual cameras and things like that.
All right, Brian, just very quickly, any new products on the horizon there? We got 10 seconds here.
Sure. I think they're on a 3-year product cycle. I think 2013 is when we're going to see something revolutionary that wirelessly integrates the home office and the living room.
All right.
For example, a TV.
2013. I'm going to mark my calendar. All right, Brian, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Brian Marshall of Gleacher Company.